The August sun beat down on the wooden platform of the Yosemite, California train station with such unrelenting fury that even the lizards had retreated beneath the boards. And it was on this blistering afternoon in 1882 that Rose Abbott stepped off the westbound locomotive and felt her corset squeeze the last breath from her lungs before the world tilted sideways and went black. Ethan Lawson had been leaning against the post outside the general store, waiting for a shipment of fence wire that was 3 weeks late, when he saw the young woman in the dove-gray traveling dress sway like a cottonwood in a windstorm. He was moving before her knees buckled, his boots thundering across the sun-bleached planks, but he was still 10 feet away when she crumpled. The dull thud of her body hitting the platform sent a jolt through his chest that had nothing to do with the heat. He dropped to his knees beside her, his shadow falling across her pale face. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with copper-colored hair that had come loose from its pins and now spread across the weathered wood like spilled honey. Her lips were parted slightly, her breathing shallow but steady. Ethan pressed 2 fingers to her wrist and felt the rapid flutter of her pulse. "Someone get Doc Henderson." He barked at the cluster of onlookers who had gathered like vultures. When nobody moved, he added with more force, "Now." A young boy took off running down Main Street, his bare feet kicking up dust. Ethan slid his arms beneath the woman's shoulders and knees, lifting her as though she weighed no more than a sack of grain. Her head lolled against his chest, and he could feel the unnatural heat radiating through the layers of her clothing. How many petticoats was she wearing? This was California in August, not Boston in December. The nearest shade was beneath the overhang of the station house, where a bench sat against the wall. Ethan carried her there, settling her carefully on the worn wood before kneeling beside the bench. He pulled off his hat and used it to fan her face, creating what little breeze he could manage. Up close, he could see the delicate dusting of freckles across her nose, the way her dark lashes rested against her cheeks like butterfly wings. "Miss," he kept his voice gentle, though his heart was hammering. "Miss, can you hear me?" She did not respond. Her skin was dry to the touch, which worried him more than if she had been sweating. He had seen heat sickness before, had watched it kill a man who had been too stubborn to take water during a cattle drive. This woman needed to cool down and fast. Ethan stood and strode to the rain barrel at the corner of the platform, dunking his bandana in the tepid water before wringing it out. When he returned, he laid the damp cloth across her forehead, then carefully loosened the tight collar of her dress. His fingers fumbled with the small buttons, and he felt heat rise to his own face that had nothing to do with the sun. But propriety mattered less than her life, and those Eastern clothes were strangling her. "Step back, Lawson. Let me through." Doc Henderson's gruff voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. The older man's medical bag was already open as he knelt beside the bench, pressing his stethoscope to the woman's chest. After a moment, he grunted. "Heat exhaustion. Probably dehydration, too. She come in on the train. Just got off when she dropped." Ethan moved aside but did not leave. Something kept him rooted there, watching as the doctor examined her pupils, checked her pulse, felt her forehead. "Someone go fetch my wife," Doc Henderson said. "This girl's going to need help getting out of these ridiculous layers." Dressed like she's attending a funeral in Philadelphia instead of traveling through the high desert. He glanced up at Ethan. "You know her?" "Never seen her before in my life." "Well, she had to be coming here for something. Check her bag." A worn leather valise sat where she had dropped it on the platform. Ethan retrieved it and set it on the bench, feeling uncomfortable about going through a stranger's belongings. But the doctor was right. They needed to know who she was, if anyone was expecting her. Inside, he found neatly folded clothes, a hairbrush, a small Bible, and a bundle of letters tied with string. The return address on the envelopes made his stomach drop. They were addressed to Silas Morgan, a widower who owned a claim up in the hills north of town. Ethan had met the man a few times, had heard he was looking for a new wife. Apparently he had found one through the matrimonial advertisements that ran in the Eastern papers. "She is a mail-order bride," Ethan said quietly, holding up one of the letters. "Coming to marry Silas Morgan." Doc Henderson shook his head. "Poor girl. Traveled all this way to end up with that sour old goat. Well, someone better ride out and tell him his bride is here, even if she is not exactly in pristine condition at the moment. I will go." The words were out of Ethan's mouth before he had thought them through. When the doctor raised an eyebrow, he added, "My fence wire is not coming today anyway. Morgan's place is on my way home." That was not entirely true. Morgan's claim was a good 5 miles out of the way. But Ethan found himself reluctant to leave this woman's side until he knew she would be all right, and riding out to notify her intended gave him a reason to stay a little longer. Mrs. Henderson arrived with her no-nonsense efficiency, shooing the remaining gawkers away and helping her husband move the young woman into the station master's office, which was marginally cooler than the platform. Ethan waited outside, pacing the length of the overhang like a caged animal. The sun was starting its slow descent toward the Sierra Nevada peaks, but the heat remained oppressive. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Mrs. Henderson emerged. "She is waking up. Took us forever to get her out of those clothes." The girl was wearing 4 layers. "Can you imagine? We have got her in just a chemise now, and her color is coming back. She will be fine, though she is asking for water like she has been lost in the desert for a week." Relief flooded through Ethan's chest. "That is good. That is real good." The older woman studied him with sharp eyes. "You planning to ride out to Morgan's place?" "Yes, madam. Take your time." There was something pointed in her tone that Ethan did not quite understand. "That girl does not need to be bounced around in a wagon today, and Morgan strikes me as the type who would load her up and haul her back to his cabin regardless of whether she is ready to travel." Ethan nodded slowly. "I will make sure I do not rush." Mrs. Henderson patted his arm. "Good boy. Now, if you want to say hello before you go." She is asking who brought her inside. The station master's office was dim and blessedly cooler than outside. The young woman was propped up on a makeshift bed of mail sacks and blankets, a tin cup of water clutched in both hands. Her hair was still down, flowing over her shoulders in waves of red gold. When she saw Ethan in the doorway, her eyes widened. They were green, he realized, the color of new grass after spring rain. "You are the one who caught me," she said. Her voice was soft, with the rounded vowels of an educated Easterner. "I remember seeing you right before everything went dark. I am so terribly sorry for causing such a scene." "No need to apologize, miss. That heat could knock down a mule." Ethan took a step inside, twisting his hat in his hands. "How are you feeling?" "Foolish, mostly." She managed a weak smile. "And mortified. This is not how I imagined arriving in California. I must have looked like a wilted flower." "You looked like someone who needed help," Ethan said firmly. "There is no shame in that. I am Ethan Lawson, by the way. I have a ranch about 10 miles south of town." "Rose Abbott." She paused, then corrected herself. "Well, Rose Abbott for now. I suppose I will be Rose Morgan soon enough." Something flickered in her eyes when she said the name, there and gone too quickly for Ethan to read. "About that." Ethan shifted his weight, suddenly uncomfortable. "I am planning to ride out to Morgan's place to let him know you have arrived. But Mrs. Henderson thinks you should rest here tonight, recover your strength before making the journey up to his claim. It is rough country, and the wagon ride would not be easy even if you were feeling well." Rose's relief was palpable. "That sounds very sensible. I fear I would not survive another journey today, even a short one." She took another sip of water, and Ethan noticed her hands were shaking slightly. What is he like? Mr. Morgan, His letters were quite brief. He mostly wrote about his claim and the mountains. Ethan chose his words carefully. He is a hard worker. Been here about 5 years, I think. Keeps to himself mostly. All of that was true, though it painted an incomplete picture. Silas Morgan was also mean-tempered, tight-fisted, and at least 20 years older than the young woman sitting before him. But what right did Ethan have to poison her against a man she had traveled across the country to marry? I see. Rose's voice had gone quiet. I imagine it will be quite an adjustment, living up in the mountains. I have lived in Philadelphia my entire life. The wildest nature I have experienced is Fairmount Park. Why did you come? The question slipped out before Ethan could stop it. If you do not mind my asking. Rose was silent for a long moment, staring down at the water in her cup. My father died 2 years ago. He was a bookkeeper, and there was no inheritance to speak of. I had been living with my aunt, but when she remarried last spring, her new husband made it clear I was not welcome to stay. I could have found work as a governess or a shop girl, but the matrimonial advertisements seemed to offer something more. A home, partnership, a new beginning. She looked up at him, her green eyes steady. Perhaps that sounds naive. It sounds brave, Ethan said, and he meant it. Leaving everything you know to start fresh in a place you have never seen. That takes courage. A faint blush colored her cheeks. Or desperation. Sometimes those two things are not so different. Ethan realized he had taken several steps closer and was now standing right beside her makeshift bed. He cleared his throat and stepped back. I should get riding if I want to reach Morgan's place before dark. You rest up, Miss Abbott. I will make sure he knows you need time to recover. Thank you, Mr. Lawson, for everything. Rose's smile was genuine now, lighting up her entire face. I am deeply grateful to have had you there when I fell. Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and headed out into the still, scorching afternoon. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Rusty, was tied up outside the general store where he had left him. As Ethan swung into the saddle, he tried to push thoughts of green eyes and copper hair out of his mind. Rose Abbott was spoken for. She had come to California to marry Silas Morgan, and that was that. But as he rode north into the foothills, following the winding dirt track that led to Morgan's claim, Ethan could not shake the memory of how light she had felt in his arms, how vulnerable she had looked lying on those wooden planks. He could not shake the feeling that he was delivering a lamb to a wolf. The sun was hanging low over the mountains by the time Ethan reached Morgan's property. It was a hardscrabble operation, just a small cabin and a few rough outbuildings surrounded by rocky ground that looked better suited for rattlesnakes than farming. Morgan came out when he heard the horse approach, his rifle held loosely in one hand until he recognized Ethan. Lawson, what brings you up here? Morgan was in his mid-40s, lean and weather-beaten, with cold gray eyes and thin lips. Your bride arrived on the afternoon train, Ethan said, staying in the saddle. She is in town. Had a spell of heat sickness when she got off. So Doc Henderson is keeping her overnight to make sure she recovers properly. Morgan's expression darkened. She is sick? I do not need a sickly wife. I need someone who can work. Ethan's hands tightened on the reins. She is not sick. She was overheated and exhausted from traveling. She will be fine after a night's rest. I will ride into town tonight and collect her. No. The word came out harder than Ethan had intended. He gentled his tone. Doc Henderson says she needs to rest. You can come fetch her tomorrow. Morgan's eyes narrowed. You seem awfully concerned about my intended wife, Lawson. I am concerned about anyone who nearly dies of heatstroke on a train platform, Ethan replied evenly. Common human decency. You have heard of that, I take it. For a moment he thought Morgan might argue. But the older man just spat into the dirt and waved a dismissive hand. Fine. I will be there first thing tomorrow morning. She better be ready to travel. Ethan turned Rusty around without another word, anger simmering in his gut. The ride back to town seemed longer than the ride out, and by the time he reached the outskirts, full dark had fallen. The lamps were lit in the windows of the houses that lined Main Street, casting warm squares of light onto the dusty road. He should ride home. His ranch was waiting, and his foreman would be wondering where he had gotten to. But instead, Ethan found himself guiding Rusty back toward the train station. Just to check on her, he told himself. To make sure she was all right. Mrs. Henderson was still there, sitting in the station master's office with her knitting. She looked up when Ethan appeared in the doorway and gave him a knowing smile. She is sleeping. Best medicine there is. But you can peek in if you want to assure yourself she is still breathing. I do not want to disturb her. I just wanted to make sure that she is safe. I know. Mrs. Henderson set down her knitting and stood, stretching her back. You have a good heart, Ethan Lawson. Always have. But you need to be careful. That girl is engaged to be married, and Silas Morgan is not a man who takes kindly to interference. I am not interfering. I am just checking on someone who fainted under my watch. Mrs. Henderson did not sound convinced. Well, your conscience is clear now. She is fine, color back in her cheeks. Been drinking water steadily all evening. Doc says she can travel tomorrow, though we both wish she did not have to go with Morgan. Ethan lowered his voice. What do you know about him? Really know? The older woman sighed. Nothing good. His first wife died in childbirth about 4 years ago. He never talks about her, but I heard from the midwife that the poor woman had bruises. Make of that what you will. She fixed Ethan with a stern look. But it is not our place to judge. Maybe he will treat this one better. Maybe he has learned something from losing the first. Or maybe Rose Abbott was walking into a nightmare, and there was nothing Ethan could do about it. The thought sat in his stomach like a stone as he bid Mrs. Henderson good night and rode home through the darkness. His ranch was modest compared to some of the big cattle operations farther south, but it was his. 200 acres of decent grazing land, a sturdy house his father had built 20 years ago, a barn and corrals that he maintained himself. Ethan had inherited it when his parents moved back east to be near his sister and her children, and he had been running it solo for the past 3 years with the help of a foreman and a couple of seasonal hands. It was a good life, a quiet life, lonely sometimes, but Ethan had never been the type to pine for what he did not have. At least not until today. He barely slept that night, tossing on sheets that felt too hot even with the window open. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Rose's face, pale and unconscious. Saw the trust in her eyes when she looked at him in the station master's office. Heard her voice saying she would be Rose Morgan soon enough. By the time the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ethan had made a decision. He was riding back into town. He would be there when Morgan came to collect Rose. Not to interfere, he told himself. Just to make sure everything went smoothly. To make sure she was all right. It was the most transparent lie he had ever told himself. But he saddled Rusty anyway and made the ride into Yosemite as the morning heat began to build. Rose was awake when he arrived, dressed in a simple blue cotton dress that Mrs. Henderson must have loaned her. She was sitting on the bench outside the station, sipping from a tin cup and looking out at the mountains with an expression of wonder on her face. They are so much bigger than I imagined, she said when Ethan approached. In the photographs, you cannot really grasp the scale. They look like they are touching the sky. Wait until winter, when the peaks are covered in snow. Then they really are something to see. Ethan sat down beside her, leaving a respectable distance between them. How are you feeling this morning? Much better. Almost human again. She turned to look at him, and there was color in her cheeks now, a spark of life in those green eyes. Mrs. Henderson told me you rode out to inform Mr. Morgan of my arrival. That was very kind of you. It was nothing. It was not nothing to me. Rose set down her cup and folded her hands in her lap. I have been thinking about what you asked me yesterday, why I came here, and I realize I did not give you a complete answer. Ethan waited, not sure what to say. The truth is, I wanted adventure, Rose continued. Is that terribly foolish? I spent my whole life in Philadelphia, doing what was expected of me, being a proper young lady, never causing trouble, and it was all so small, so suffocating. When I read Mr. Morgan's advertisement, I did not just see an escape from my circumstances. I saw possibility, the chance to become someone different, someone braver. She laughed softly. Then I fainted within 5 minutes of arriving, which rather undermines the whole brave pioneer woman image I had in mind. You are braver than you think, Ethan said. Most people never leave their comfortable cages, even when the door is wide open. Rose tilted her head, studying him. That sounds like the voice of experience. Maybe. Ethan pulled his gaze away from hers, focusing on the mountains instead. My folks wanted me to sell the ranch and move east with them. They said California was too rough, too dangerous, that I would never find a wife out here, never have a family. But I could not imagine leaving. This place is in my blood. Do you regret staying? Not for a second. The conviction in his voice surprised even him. Though my mother does not let me forget that I am 27 and still unmarried. She sends me newspaper clippings of eligible young ladies in Boston whenever she writes. Rose laughed, a real laugh this time that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. My aunt did the same thing except with eligible young men in Philadelphia. Clerks and lawyers and bankers, all perfectly respectable and perfectly dull. I wanted more than a respectable life. I wanted to feel alive. Before Ethan could respond, the sound of hoofbeats on hard-packed earth announced Morgan's arrival. The older man rode into town at a trot, pulling his horse up short in front of the station. He dismounted and strode toward them, his gaze fixed on Rose. So you are Rose Abbott, he said without preamble. His eyes traveled over her in a way that made Ethan's jaw tighten. You are younger than I expected. How old are you? 23, Rose replied, standing up. Her voice was steady, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. And you are Mr. Morgan. I apologize for not being able to meet you yesterday. The heat rather got the better of me. You had better toughen up if you are going to survive out here. Morgan's tone was not unkind, exactly, but there was no warmth in it either. The mountains do not care about delicate Eastern sensibilities. Can you cook? Rose blinked at the abrupt question. Yes, I am not an expert, but I can prepare basic meals. Can you sew? Mend clothes? Yes. What about cleaning game? Preserving meat? I have never done those things, but I am willing to learn. Morgan grunted, apparently satisfied. We will head out now. I have supplies to load, and I want to be back before dark. Actually, Doc Henderson said, appearing from inside the station. I would prefer if Miss Abbott waited until tomorrow to make the journey. She is recovered, but I want to be certain there are no lingering effects from yesterday's episode. I am fine, Doctor, Rose said quickly. Too quickly. Really, I am ready to go. Ethan stood up, positioning himself slightly between Rose and Morgan. Maybe the doc is right. One more day would not hurt anything. Morgan's eyes went cold. I do not recall asking for your opinion, Lawson. This is between me and my intended wife. He turned to Rose. If you say you are fine, then get your things. We are leaving. For just a moment, Rose's gaze met Ethan's. There was something in her eyes, a silent plea or maybe just fear, and it made every protective instinct in his body roar to life. But what could he do? She had chosen to come here. She had agreed to marry this man. It was not Ethan's place to interfere. Rose gathered her valise and the bundle of clothes Mrs. Henderson had prepared for her. She thanked the doctor and his wife, her manners impeccable even though her hands were shaking slightly. Then she walked over to Ethan. "Thank you again, Mr. Lawson, for everything." She held out her hand, and when he took it, her fingers were small and cold in his. "I hope we will see each other again." "I am sure we will. Yosemite is not a big town." Morgan had already mounted his horse and was clearly impatient to leave. He did not offer to help Rose up behind him, just pointed to the saddle and waited for her to figure it out herself. Ethan moved to assist her, but she shook her head slightly, squaring her shoulders and managing to pull herself up on her own. Her skirts were not designed for riding, and the position looked uncomfortable, but she did not complain. "Hold on tight," Morgan said. "The trail gets rough once we leave town." Then they were riding away, Rose's copper hair streaming behind her like a banner. Ethan watched until they disappeared around the bend, his chest tight with an emotion he did not want to name. "That man is going to make her miserable," Mrs. Henderson said quietly, coming to stand beside him. "Mark my words. It is not our business." "Maybe not, but that does not mean you are going to be able to stop thinking about her." The older woman patted his shoulder. "Go on home, Ethan. Try to forget about the girl with the green eyes. She has made her choice." But Ethan could not forget. As the days passed, Rose occupied his thoughts more than she should have. He threw himself into work on the ranch, repairing fences and moving cattle to fresh grazing, but nothing could distract him for long. He found himself riding into Yosemite more often than necessary, always with some excuse about supplies or business, always hoping he might see her. 2 weeks after Rose's arrival, Ethan was in the general store when he overheard Mrs. Patterson, the storekeeper's wife, talking to another woman. "Saw Silas Morgan's new wife in here yesterday. Poor thing looked like she had not slept in days. Bruise on her arm too, though she tried to hide it." Ethan's blood turned to ice. "What did you say?" Mrs. Patterson looked startled. "Oh, Mr. Lawson, I did not realize you were there. I was just mentioning that I saw Mrs. Morgan. She came in to buy some basic supplies. You said she had a bruise." The woman shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I cannot be certain. Could have been a shadow or just dirt. She was wearing long sleeves despite the heat, which struck me as odd." Ethan paid for his purchases without another word and strode out of the store. His mind was racing. A bruise could mean anything. Rose could have fallen or knocked into something. It did not necessarily mean Morgan was hurting her. But the memory of Mrs. Henderson's words echoed in his head. Morgan's first wife had died with bruises on her body. For 3 days Ethan wrestled with himself. It was not his business. Rose was a married woman now. He had no right to interfere. But on the 4th day he saddled Rusty and rode north to Morgan's claim, telling himself he just wanted to see for himself that she was all right. The cabin looked even more run down in broad daylight than it had during his previous evening visit. The yard was cluttered with broken equipment and debris. A few scrawny chickens scratched in the dirt. There was no sign of anyone outside. Ethan dismounted and approached the cabin, his boots loud on the wooden porch. He knocked on the door and waited. Rose opened it and Ethan's stomach dropped. She had lost weight in just 2 weeks, her face gaunt and shadows under her eyes. Her dress was too big for her now, hanging loose on her frame, but it was the look in her eyes that hit him hardest. The light he had seen on the train platform, that spark of hope and adventure, had been extinguished. "Mr. Lawson," her voice was flat. "What brings you here?" "I was in the area and thought I would check in, see how you are settling in." It was a weak excuse and they both knew it, Rose glanced over her shoulder into the dark interior of the cabin. That is very kind of you, but I am quite busy. My husband will be back from checking his traps soon, and I need to have his meal ready. Rose. He dropped his voice, stepping closer. Are you all right? If something is wrong, if you need help. I am fine. The words were automatic, rehearsed. Thank you for your concern, but everything is fine. Now if you will excuse me. She started to close the door, but Ethan caught it with his hand. Wait, please. He knew he was overstepping, knew he could be making everything worse, but he could not let her disappear back into that cabin without trying. If you ever need anything, if you ever need somewhere to go, my ranch is 10 miles south of town. Anyone can give you directions. You understand. For just a second, Rose's mask slipped. Her eyes filled with tears, and her lower lip trembled. Then she pulled herself together, stepping back and closing the door firmly in his face. Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring at the scarred wood. Then he turned and walked back to Rusty, anger and helplessness warring in his chest. He could not force Rose to accept his help. He could not drag her away from her husband, no matter how much every instinct told him she was in danger. The law was clear. A wife was her husband's property. Unless Morgan killed her, there was nothing anyone could do. The ride back to his ranch was long and bitter. Ethan spent the rest of the day working himself into exhaustion, but it did not help. That night, he lay awake thinking about Rose alone in that cabin, about what might be happening to her, about his own cowardice in riding away. 3 more weeks passed. Ethan heard nothing about Rose, saw no sign of her in town. He told himself that no news was good news, that maybe he had been wrong to worry. But the knot in his stomach never loosened. Then, on a cool October morning with the first hint of autumn in the air, Ethan woke before dawn to the sound of someone pounding on his door. He grabbed his rifle and went downstairs in his union suit, expecting trouble. What he found was Rose Abbott Morgan, standing on his porch in a torn dress with blood on her lip and terror in her eyes. You said if I ever needed somewhere to go, she whispered. Please. I did not know where else to turn. Ethan pulled her inside without hesitation, bolting the door behind them. What happened? Are you hurt? He is going to kill me. Rose's voice was shaking, her whole body trembling. I thought I could endure it. I thought it would get better. But tonight he came home drunk and angry about something, and he had his hands around my throat. She touched her neck, and Ethan could see the red marks even in the dim light. I waited until he passed out. Then I took his horse and ran. I did not know if I would find your ranch in the dark, but I remembered you said it was 10 miles south, and I just kept riding. You are safe now. Ethan set down his rifle and lit a lamp, then guided Rose to a chair. Let me get you some water. While she drank, he stoked the fire in the kitchen stove and put on coffee. His mind was racing through possibilities and problems. Morgan would come looking for his wife. When he did, there would be confrontation, maybe violence. Ethan needed to be ready. I am sorry, Rose said quietly. I should not have come here. I am putting you in danger. Do not apologize. You did exactly the right thing. Ethan pulled up another chair and sat across from her. Tell me everything. The story that poured out was worse than he had imagined. Morgan had been cruel from the first day, criticizing everything Rose did, calling her useless and stupid. The physical violence had started small, a hard grip on her arm, a shove against the wall. But it had escalated quickly. He would fly into rages over the smallest things, sometimes beating her with his belt. She had tried to be perfect, to anticipate his moods, but there was no pattern to his anger. He was simply a mean, violent man who enjoyed hurting someone smaller and weaker. I thought about leaving sooner, Rose said, staring into her coffee. But where would I go? I have no money, no family. I could not ask you for help because I barely knew you, and I was ashamed. I kept thinking maybe I was doing something wrong. Maybe if I just tried harder, he would be kinder. This is not your fault, Ethan said firmly. None of it. You did nothing to deserve being treated that way. The law will not see it that way. I am his wife. He has the right to discipline me as he sees fit. Not in my house, he does not. Ethan stood and began pacing. You are not going back there, Rose. I do not care what the law says. You will stay here where you are safe. He will come for me. Let him come. Rose looked up at him, and for the first time since she had arrived, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. You would do that? Stand against him for me? Yes. The answer was immediate and absolute. I would do that and more. They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee as the sun began to rise outside. Ethan could see Rose starting to relax, the tension slowly draining from her shoulders. She was safe here. He would make sure of it. I need to wash up, Rose said eventually. Is there somewhere I can clean myself? Ethan showed her to the spare bedroom upstairs and brought up a basin of warm water and clean cloths. There are some of my mother's old clothes in the trunk at the foot of the bed. They will be too big, but they will do until we can get you something better. Take your time. Rest if you need to. You are safe here. Rose caught his hand as he turned to leave. Thank you, Ethan. I know we barely know each other, but you have shown me more kindness in one day than my husband showed me in 5 weeks of marriage. The use of his first name sent warmth through his chest. You do not need to thank me. Just promise me you will never go back to him. I promise. After Rose went upstairs, Ethan dressed quickly and loaded his Winchester, setting it beside the front door. Then he went out to the barn and told his foreman, a capable man named Jack, what had happened. Morgan will come looking for her, Jack said, his weathered face grim. Probably today. I know. Can you handle things here if trouble starts? I can shoot straight and I do not like men who beat women. That answer your question? It does. They did not have to wait long. Around mid-morning, the thunder of hooves announced Morgan's arrival. Ethan stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, and watched the older man dismount. Where is she? Morgan's face was mottled with rage. I know she is here. That worthless woman stole my horse and ran off in the night. She belongs to me, Lawson, and I want her back. She is not property, and she is not going anywhere with you, Ethan replied calmly. Now get off my land. The hell I will. She is my wife. The law says she has to come home with me. The law also says attempted murder is a crime. I have seen the marks on her throat. You tried to strangle her. Morgan's hand moved toward the pistol at his hip, but he froze when he heard the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked. Jack had positioned himself at the corner of the barn, his weapon trained on Morgan. You are outnumbered and outgunned, Ethan said. And if you try to take her by force, you will not leave this ranch alive. Now you have 2 choices. You can ride away and file for divorce on grounds of desertion. Or you can keep pushing and see what happens. For a long moment, Morgan just stared at him, fury and calculation warring in his eyes. Finally, he spat in the dirt and swung back into his saddle. You think you have won, but you have not. I will go to the sheriff. I will have the law on my side. Go ahead. Tell the sheriff about how your wife ran away because you tried to kill her. See how sympathetic he is. Morgan jabbed his heels into his horse's sides and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Ethan did not lower his rifle until the man was out of sight. That went better than I expected, Jack observed, walking over. Though I do not think we have seen the last of him. Neither do I. Keep your eyes open. If he comes back, fire a warning shot and I will come running. Ethan went back inside to find Rose standing at the top of the stairs, wearing one of his mother's old dresses cinched tight with a belt. Her hair was clean and brushed, falling loose around her shoulders. She looked younger somehow and desperately vulnerable. "He is gone," Ethan said. "For now." Rose came down the stairs slowly. "I heard what you said about divorce. Is that really possible?" "I do not know. But I know a lawyer in Sacramento who might be able to help. I will write to him today." "I cannot pay for a lawyer." "You do not need to. I will handle it." Rose shook her head. "You have already done so much. I cannot ask you to spend your money on my problems." "You are not asking. I am offering." Ethan set his rifle aside and moved closer. "Rose, I need you to understand something. From the moment I saw you fall on that train platform, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. I told myself it was just concern, just wanting to make sure you were all right. But it is more than that." He took a deep breath, knowing he was about to cross a line he could not uncross. "I care about you, more than I should, given that you are a married woman. But I do, and I am not going to stand by and let Morgan hurt you anymore." Tears spilled down Rose's cheeks. "I do not deserve your kindness." "Yes, you do. You deserve to be treated with respect and gentleness. You deserve to feel safe. And if I can give you that, then I will." Rose closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Ethan held her carefully, afraid she might break. She felt so small in his embrace, so fragile. But he could also feel her strength, the fact that she had survived 5 weeks of hell and still had the courage to run. They stood like that for a long time, neither one wanting to let go. Finally, Rose pulled back and looked up at him with those green eyes that haunted his dreams. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you rest and recover. You eat proper meals and remember what it is like to feel safe. And I will figure out how to get you free from Morgan permanently." "And after that?" Ethan knew what she was asking. He also knew it was too soon, that she needed time to heal before she could think about a future with anyone. But he could not help the hope that bloomed in his chest. "After that, we will see. One step at a time." The next few weeks fell into a careful routine. Rose stayed at the ranch, helping with cooking and mending and the other household tasks that Ethan had been neglecting since his mother left. She was an excellent cook, much better than she had given herself credit for, and the house began to feel like a home again with her presence in it. Ethan was scrupulously proper, never pushing for more than Rose was ready to give. She slept in the spare bedroom with the door locked, though he suspected she was doing that more for her own peace of mind than because she feared him. During the day, they worked side by side, talking about everything and nothing. Rose told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her love of books and her secret dream of one day writing stories of her own. Ethan told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd and maybe build a new barn next spring. It was easy being with Rose, natural, like they had known each other for years instead of weeks. But the shadow of Silas Morgan hung over everything. He had not returned to the ranch, but Ethan heard through town gossip that he was making noise about taking legal action. He claimed Rose had stolen his horse and money, which was a lie, and that Ethan was harboring a fugitive. The letter from the Sacramento lawyer was not encouraging. Getting a divorce was difficult under California law, and even more so when the wife had left the husband. The lawyer suggested annulment on grounds of fraud or cruelty, but warned that it would require testimony and evidence, and there was no guarantee a judge would grant it. "So I am trapped," Rose said quietly when Ethan shared the lawyer's response. They were sitting on the porch in the cool evening air, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Legally bound to a man who tried to kill me with no way out. There is always a way out. We just have not found it yet." Rose turned to look at him. "Why are you doing this, Ethan? Really? You barely know me." I am nothing but trouble for you. You are not trouble. And I do know you. Maybe not your favorite color or your birthday or 100 other small details. But I know the important things. I know you are brave and kind and resilient. I know you have a sharp mind and a generous heart. I know that being around you makes me happier than I have been in years. He paused, then added quietly, and I know I am falling in love with you, even though the timing is terrible and the situation is impossible. Rose's breath caught. Ethan, you do not have to say anything. I know you are not ready. I know you need time to heal. But I wanted you to know how I feel. So there are no secrets between us. For a long moment, Rose was silent. Then she reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I am falling in love with you too. I think I started that first day, when you caught me before I hit the ground. But I am scared. What if I am just grateful? What if I am confusing kindness with love because I have been treated so badly? Those are fair questions. And honestly, I do not know the answers. But I do know that what I feel for you is not pity or obligation. It is something deeper, something real. Then we will figure it out, Rose said softly. Together, however long it takes. They sat there holding hands as the stars came out, and for the first time since she had arrived on his doorstep bleeding and terrified, Rose looked truly at peace. The situation with Morgan came to a head in early November. Ethan rode into town for supplies and was immediately intercepted by Sheriff Coleman. A fair-minded man Ethan had always respected. Need to talk to you about Silas Morgan's complaint, the sheriff said without preamble. He is claiming you are keeping his wife against her will. That is a lie. Rose is staying at my ranch of her own free choice. She left Morgan because he was beating her. She willing to testify to that? If she has to. The sheriff sighed. Look, Lawson, I am not unsympathetic. Morgan has a reputation and not a good one. But the law is the law. Mrs. Morgan is his wife, and unless we can prove he was endangering her life, she is legally obligated to return to him. He tried to strangle her. You want to see the bruises? Bruises fade. Unless you have a doctor's testimony from when it happened, it is her word against his. And a wife's testimony against her husband does not carry much weight in court. Ethan felt rage building in his chest. So you are saying there is nothing we can do? She just has to go back to a man who will likely kill her. I am saying the legal path is complicated. But the sheriff glanced around to make sure no one was listening. If Mrs. Morgan were to, say, disappear, if she were to leave California entirely and start fresh somewhere else with a new name, well, Morgan could not exactly drag her back if he did not know where she was. Ethan stared at the sheriff. Are you suggesting we run? I am suggesting that sometimes the law and justice are not the same thing. And I am suggesting that I would not look too hard if Rose Morgan happened to vanish. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Think about it. But do not take too long. Morgan is pushing for a court order, and I will not be able to protect her once that happens. Ethan rode home in a daze. The sheriff's suggestion made sense, but it would mean leaving everything. His ranch, his home, the life he had built here. Could he do that? Could he walk away from all of it for Rose? The answer came to him before he even finished asking the question. Yes, he absolutely could. When he told Rose what the sheriff had said, she went pale. I cannot ask you to give up your ranch. This is your home, your livelihood. I will leave on my own. I will go to San Francisco or Portland and find work. You have already sacrificed enough for me. You are not going anywhere alone, Ethan said firmly. If we do this, we do it together. But your ranch can be managed by Jack. He is a good man and he knows the operation. I will deed it over to him with the understanding that if we ever come back, we buy it back. But Rose, you need to understand what this means. We would be running. living under false names, always looking over our shoulders. We could never legally marry as long as Morgan is alive. Are you willing to live that way? Rose was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the mountains she had come to love. When I left Philadelphia, I wanted adventure. I wanted to feel alive. I got more than I bargained for, and not in a good way. But these past weeks with you, I have felt something I never expected. I have felt happy, safe, cherished. I do not need a marriage certificate to know what we have is real. So yes, if the choice is between running with you or staying here and eventually being forced back to Morgan, I choose you. Every time. The decision made, they moved quickly. Ethan signed over the ranch to Jack, keeping only enough money to get them started somewhere new. He told people in town that he was taking Rose to stay with relatives in Oregon while the legal situation was sorted out. A few people probably suspected the truth, but no one said anything. On a cold November morning, with their belongings packed into saddlebags and a wagon loaded with supplies, Ethan and Rose left California behind. They rode north, following back roads and staying away from towns where they might be recognized. At night, they camped under the stars, and Ethan taught Rose how to cook over an open fire and read the weather in the clouds. It was hard traveling, especially as winter approached, but it was also liberating. For the first time in her life, Rose was truly free. No aunt dictating her behavior, no husband controlling her every move. Just the open road and the man riding beside her. They made it to Oregon by early December and settled in a small town called Ridgeview, far enough from anywhere that no one would think to look for them. Ethan gave his name as Ethan Lawrence, and Rose became Rose Lawrence, his wife in everything but legal paperwork. They rented a small house on the edge of town, and Ethan found work at a nearby ranch while Rose took in sewing and mending. It was not the life either of them had imagined, but it was theirs. They built it together, day by day, creating a home filled with laughter and warmth. As winter gave way to spring, Rose began to truly heal. The shadows in her eyes faded. She smiled more, laughed easily. The nightmares that had plagued her in those first weeks became less frequent. And as she healed, the love between them deepened. It started with stolen kisses in the kitchen, tender touches when they thought no one was looking. Then one night in early spring, Rose came to Ethan's room and knocked softly on the door. "I am ready," she said simply, "if you still want me." Ethan pulled her inside and kissed her with all the pent-up longing of the past months. "I have wanted you since the moment I saw you," he whispered against her lips. "I will always want you." They made love slowly, tenderly, Ethan showing Rose what it meant to be cherished by someone who truly loved her. Afterward, she cried in his arms, but they were good tears, healing tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me, for loving me, for giving me a life worth living." "You saved yourself," Ethan replied, holding her close. "I just gave you a safe place to land." They lived quietly in Ridgeview for 2 years, building a life together. Ethan worked his way up to foreman at the ranch where he was employed, his skill with horses and cattle earning him respect and better wages. Rose's sewing business grew as word spread about her talent and fair prices. They made friends, became part of the community, though they were always careful never to reveal too much about their past. In the summer of their second year in Oregon, Rose discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror. They wanted this child desperately, but they also knew it would complicate everything. A child meant roots, meant being even more vulnerable to being found. But they decided to move forward anyway. Their son was born in February 1885, a healthy boy with Rose's copper hair and Ethan's blue eyes. They named him Thomas, and he was the light of their lives. It was Thomas who brought about the change in their circumstances, though not in the way they expected. When the boy was 6 months old, Rose received a letter forwarded through several addresses. It was from Mrs. Henderson back in Yosemite, and the news it contained was shocking. Silas Morgan was dead. He had been killed in a bar fight in Sacramento, drunk and violent as always, picking a fight with the wrong man. With his death, Rose was finally truly free. "We can go home," Ethan said, reading the letter over Rose's shoulder. "We can go back to California, to the ranch." But Rose surprised him. "Is that what you want? To go back?" Ethan looked around their small house, at the life they had built in Ridgeview. He thought about the ranch in California, the land he had loved. Then he looked at Rose holding their son, at the peace in her eyes. "I want to be wherever you are," he said. "That is home to me now." "Then let us stay," Rose said. "At least for a while. Thomas is settled here. We have friends. And maybe someday we will go back to California. But for now, I like our life in Oregon." So they stayed. But with Morgan dead, they could stop hiding. They married legally in a quiet ceremony at the local church, making official what had been true in their hearts for years. Rose Abbott Lawrence became Rose Lawson, and Ethan finally got to introduce her as his wife without fear. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved horses as much as his father. Rose started writing the stories she had always dreamed of, getting several published in magazines back east. Ethan bought a small ranch of their own, building it from nothing into a modest but successful operation. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Emma born in 1887, and another son, Daniel, born in 1890. The house was always full of noise and laughter, so different from the silent, fearful existence Rose had endured with Morgan. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan took Rose back to California to visit. They rode into Yosemite on a warm June day, and Rose stood on the train platform where she had fainted so many years ago. "It feels like a lifetime ago," she said, looking around at the town that had changed so much. "Like it happened to a different person." "In a way, it did," Ethan replied. "You are not that scared girl anymore. You are a wife, a mother, a writer. You are stronger than you ever imagined you could be." They visited Mrs. Henderson, who cried happy tears at seeing them together with their children. They stopped by Jack, who had taken excellent care of the ranch and was thrilled to see his old friend. And they visited the small cemetery on the hill, where a simple marker bore the name of Silas Morgan. Rose stood looking at the grave for a long time. Ethan waited patiently, letting her process whatever she was feeling. Finally, she turned away. "I forgive him," she said quietly. "Not because he deserves it, but because I deserve to be free of the anger. He does not get to take up any more space in my heart or my mind." "You are a better person than I am," Ethan said. "I am still angry at what he did to you." "Then be angry. That is your right. But for me, I am choosing to let it go. I have too much to be grateful for. Too much joy in my life to waste energy on hating a dead man." They left California the next day and returned to Oregon, to their ranch and their children and the life they had built together. The years continued to pass, bringing all the normal joys and sorrows. Emma grew into a thoughtful, bookish girl who wanted to be a teacher. Thomas took over more of the ranch work as he got older, showing his father's talent with animals. Daniel was the wild one, always getting into trouble but with a good heart underneath. Rose's writing career flourished. She published 2 novels, both successful enough that they were able to expand the ranch and build a bigger house. Ethan's reputation as a horseman spread, and people came from all over Oregon to buy his stock. But the greatest success, the thing they were proudest of, was the love they had built. It had started with a woman fainting on a train platform and a cowboy who cared enough to carry her to shade and wait. It had survived violence and fear, running and hiding, uncertainty and sacrifice. And it had grown into something beautiful and lasting. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Rose and Ethan sat on the porch of their ranch house and watched the sunset. "Do you ever regret it?" Rose asked. "Giving up your ranch in California? Running away with me?" Ethan took her hand, the gesture as natural now as breathing. "Not for one single second. That ranch was just land. You are my life. You and our children and the family we have built. I would give up 1,000 ranches for that. I am the luckiest woman alive," Rose said softly. "That day on the train platform, when the world went black and I fell, I thought my life was ending. I thought I had made a terrible mistake coming west. But I was wrong. My life was just beginning. And it began the moment you caught me. I will always catch you," Ethan promised. "No matter how many times you fall, I will be there to catch you and help you stand again." That is what love means. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Rose leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that was more beautiful than either could have imagined. The heat that had nearly killed Rose that August day in 1882 had instead brought her to the man who would save her in every way a person can be saved. It had brought her home, though home turned out to be not a place but a person. A cowboy with kind eyes and a brave heart who had carried her to shade and waited, changing both their lives forever. Their story had started with a fall and a rescue, but it became so much more. It became a testament to the power of love to heal, to transform, to create something beautiful out of pain and fear. It became a legacy they would pass down to their children and grandchildren. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings. And as they sat together on that porch, surrounded by the life they had built, Rose and Ethan knew that every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of fear had been worth it, because it had led them here, to this perfect moment, to this perfect love. Their children came out to join them as the stars began to appear, and the house filled with voices and laughter. Emma played the piano while Thomas told stories about the horses. Daniel chased his young children around the yard, their giggles carrying on the evening breeze. This was what Rose had dreamed of when she left Philadelphia all those years ago. Not the adventure she thought she wanted, but something better. Family, a home, a love that had withstood every test and emerged stronger. She had wanted to feel alive, and Ethan had given her that and so much more. As the night deepened and the family eventually dispersed to their homes or their beds, Rose and Ethan remained on the porch. They sat until the moon rose high and bright, neither one wanting to break the spell of the moment. "I love you," Rose said finally. "I do not say it enough, but I do. With everything I am." "I love you too," Ethan replied. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after. You are my heart, Rose. The best thing that ever happened to me." They went inside together, hand in hand, and closed the door on another perfect day. Their story, which had begun with such drama and fear, had found its happy ending. Not because everything was perfect or easy, but because they had each other. And that, they both knew, was more than enough. The years ahead would bring more changes, more challenges. But Rose and Ethan would face them together, just as they had faced everything since that fateful day on the train platform. Their love had survived the worst and celebrated the best. It had proven itself strong enough to weather any storm. And so they lived, loved, and built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The story of the mail-order bride who fainted from heat on the platform, and the cowboy who carried her to shade and waited, became family legend. Their great-grandchildren would tell it to their children, keeping alive the memory of how one act of kindness had blossomed into a love story for the ages. But Rose and Ethan did not think of themselves as legendary. They were just two people who had found each other when they needed it most, who had chosen each other every day since, who had built a life of meaning and joy out of the ashes of what had been. They were ordinary in the best possible way, their happiness found not in grand gestures but in small, everyday moments of love and partnership. As they lay in bed that night, Rose curled against Ethan's side the way she had for 25 years. She thought about that younger version of herself stepping off the train in Yosemite. How terrified she had been, how lost. How could she have known that fainting on that platform would be the best thing that ever happened to her? That losing consciousness would mean finding her soulmate? Life was strange that way. The worst moments could lead to the best outcomes. The darkest nights could bring the brightest dawns. You just had to be brave enough to keep going, to accept help when it was offered, to open your heart even when you were scared. Rose had done all of that. She had been brave even when she did not feel brave. She had accepted Ethan's help and opened her heart to his love. And in return, she had received a life beyond her wildest dreams. Ethan felt Rose relax into sleep beside him, her breathing deep and even. He held her close, this woman who had changed his life so completely. He still remembered the first time he saw her, crumpling to the platform in a cloud of gray skirts. Remembered the fierce protectiveness that had surged through him, the absolute certainty that he could not let anything happen to her. That certainty had guided him ever since. Through confrontations with Morgan, through the hard decision to leave his ranch, through years of building a new life in a new place. Every choice had been made with Rose in mind, and he had never regretted a single one. This was what love looked like, he thought. Not the passionate romance of novels, though they had had plenty of passion over the years, but the quiet, steady devotion of choosing someone every day, of building a life together brick by brick, moment by moment, of being there when your partner needed you and trusting them to be there when you needed them. He and Rose had built something real and lasting, something worth every sacrifice. And as Ethan drifted off to sleep, his wife in his arms and his family safe under his roof, he knew with absolute certainty that he was the luckiest man alive. The story of Rose and Ethan Lawson did not end that night, of course. They lived many more years together, watching their children grow and have children of their own. They faced joys and sorrows, triumphs and setbacks, all the things that make up a full life. But they faced it all together, and that made all the difference. When Rose published her third novel at age 60, dedicating it to the cowboy who had saved her life, she included a note in the acknowledgments that said simply, "To Ethan, who caught me when I fell and has been catching me ever since. This is your story as much as mine." When Ethan finally retired from ranching at 65, turning the operation over to Thomas and Daniel, he spent his days sitting on the porch with Rose, reading her manuscripts and offering suggestions, working on his own memoirs about life as a horseman in the Wild West. They grew old together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. The passion of youth transformed into something richer and more profound, a partnership built on decades of shared experience and unwavering devotion. Rose's hair turned from copper to silver, and Ethan's face became lined with the marks of a life well lived. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people they had been. Rose still saw the handsome cowboy who had carried her to shade and waited by her side. Ethan still saw the brave young woman who had chosen adventure and found love. In the spring of 1907, Rose fell ill. The doctors called it pneumonia and did their best, but she was 73 and her body was tired. She died peacefully in her sleep with Ethan holding her hand, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. At her funeral, Ethan stood and told the story one last time. About the day a young woman fainted on a train platform in California, and a cowboy caught her. About how that moment had changed both their lives forever. About the love they had built from that unlikely beginning, a love that had sustained them through 25 years of marriage and beyond. "She was the bravest person I ever knew," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "She survived things that would have destroyed a lesser person. She built a life full of love and joy and meaning, and she made me a better man just by loving me." I will miss her every day for the rest of my life. But I will never regret a single moment we had together. Ethan lived another 5 years after Rose's death, surrounded by family but always carrying the quiet sadness of her absence. He spent his final years writing down their story in detail, wanting to preserve it for future generations. He wanted his great-great-grandchildren to know where they came from, to understand the power of love and courage and second chances. When he died in 1912 at the age of 78, he was buried beside Rose under a headstone that read, "Ethan and Rose Lawson, two souls who found each other when they needed it most. Together forever." Their children found Ethan's manuscript among his belongings and had it published as a memoir. It became a modest success, touching readers with its honest depiction of love in all its forms, perfect and imperfect, passionate and comfortable, fleeting and eternal. But the real legacy of Rose and Ethan Lawson was not in books or gravestones. It was in the family they had created, the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their love forward. It was in the values they had instilled, of courage and kindness and choosing love even when it was hard. It was in the story that was told and retold at family gatherings, becoming more legendary with each telling but never losing the essential truth at its heart. That a woman had fainted on a train platform in the summer heat. That a cowboy had carried her to shade and waited. And that from that simple act of kindness had grown a love story that would endure for generations. It was a reminder that the biggest moments in life often come disguised as small ones. That a chance encounter can change everything. That love is not always neat or convenient, but it is always worth fighting for. That happy endings are possible, even when the beginning is dark. Rose and Ethan's story became a beacon for their descendants, proof that even in the hardest times, love can prevail. That even when you feel lost and alone, the right person might be just around the corner, ready to catch you when you fall. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Rose and Ethan were together still, walking hand in hand through meadows of wildflowers, young and strong and deeply in love, laughing at shared memories, making plans for an eternity together, grateful for every moment they had shared and every moment still to come. Their love had started with a fall on a hot summer day in California, but it had become something timeless, something that transcended death and distance and the passing of years. It had become the kind of love that people write songs about, that inspires poets and dreamers. But to Rose and Ethan, it was simply their life, the greatest adventure either of them had ever known, the best decision they had ever made. The love that had defined them and sustained them and made everything else worthwhile. It was a love born in the Wild West, tempered by hardship, strengthened by sacrifice, and ultimately triumphant. A love that proved that sometimes the best things in life come when you are not looking for them. When you have given up hope and prepared yourself for the worst. When you faint on a train platform and a stranger decides to be kind. That kindness, that choice to care about another human being, had echoed through decades, had created lives and shaped futures, had proven that one person's compassion can change the world, at least for one other person. And sometimes that is enough. Rose and Ethan's story was over, but it was also eternal. As long as someone remembered it, as long as someone told it, they would live on. Two souls who found each other against impossible odds and created something beautiful. Two people who proved that love is the greatest adventure of all. And it all started with a woman fainting from heat on a platform, and a cowboy who carried her to shade and waited. Who could have known that such a small moment would bloom into something so magnificent? But that is the magic of love. Takes root in the most unexpected places and grows beyond anything you could have imagined. That is the legacy Rose and Ethan left behind. Not wealth or fame, though they had achieved modest amounts of both, but something far more valuable. A love story that inspired generations. A reminder that goodness exists in the world, that heroes are real, that happy endings are possible. Their descendants carried that legacy forward, telling the story to their children, who told it to their children, who told it to theirs. And with each telling, new people were inspired to believe in love, to take chances, to be kind to strangers who might need help. Rose and Ethan Lawson had lived and loved and built something lasting. They had faced darkness and emerged into light. They had taken a chance on each other and been rewarded beyond measure. Their story was complete, their ending happy, their love eternal. And somewhere in California, on a train platform in Yosemite, if you listen carefully on a hot summer day, you might hear an echo. The sound of boots running across wooden planks. A woman gasping in surprise as strong arms catch her. A gentle voice asking if she is all right. The beginning of a love story for the ages. The moment two lives changed forever. The instant when destiny intervened and brought two souls together who were meant to find each other. That moment lives on, eternal and unchanging. A testament to the power of love, the importance of kindness, and the magic that can happen when you open your heart to possibility. Rose and Ethan's story reminds us that we are never truly alone, that help can come from unexpected places, and that the love of your life might be waiting just around the corner. All you have to do is be brave enough to fall, and trust that someone will be there to catch you.